Hi, everyone. Hopefully you're having a great summit. I already know you are. So today we're just going to segue into a panel about gender-based violence and how we as Girl Up advocates could combat that in our everyday communities. So first, I'll introduce myself. I am a Girl Up TA from the 2019 and 2020 class, and I'm located in the southern region of the US, so in South Carolina. So today we're just going to dive right into the panel. So one of the first questions, and I initially want everyone to respond to explain their line of work with this issue, is how do you define gender-based violence? And what is the difference between gender-based violence and just regular violence? And I would love everyone to answer on the panel. Vivi, can you start us off?
All right, thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Anindya Restuviani, but people call me Vivi. I am from Jakarta, Indonesia, and I'm the co-director of Hollaback Jakarta, this is a great question coming to from things that I've been working on with Hollaback Jakarta, which is specifically talking about violence, especially gender-based violence in Jakarta, especially in public space. The way that Hollaback Jakarta actually defines gender-based violence, every time we do a training, usually we define what violence first. Usually people will answer, like when you're talking about violence, the first thing that will come into their mind is something that is physical, but we know that violence is not always something that is physical. So we define violence as any behavior, whether it was intention or not, that demeaning, humiliating, hurting, embarrassing a person, and that a reasonable person should have known those acts would be unwelcome. But when it comes to gender-based violence, like its name, gender-based, it means that those behaviors basically conducted and motivated by a certain, like based on a certain gender. For example, when we're talking about violence against women, the reason why violence against women are not exclusively, but majority when we're talking about gender-based violence, we're talking about violence against women, is because there is a certain gender stereotype that creating this role or stereotypes towards women as someone who is as a gender that is a less a human, or there a lot of time it's become a justification of a violence that was being committed towards a woman or any other gender minority. So the more you have a minority identity, it means that the more vulnerable you are in receiving violence. So yeah, I hope that's clear enough. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, the next person I'd like to touch on based on their line of work is Dr. Kakenya.
Thank you. Great. My name is Dr. Kakenya Ntaiya. I work in rural Kenya. I founded the organization called Kakenya's Dream, which is really works with girls to end gender-based violence through education. So I think Vivi defined violence in a general way, which is, and then going specific into gender-based violence. In the line of work that I do, we really focus on the violence that is towards girls and women, more specifically on the issues of female genital cutting and early marriages, issues of rapes of young kids, and beating of women just because they are considered women. So our work is really, we work more specifically on those issues that really harm women. And also I think the whole thing is that putting women in control, humiliating them, and really reducing their powers and putting, so to say, women in their spaces. So I think violence can, it's broader. When you say violence can be very broad, but when you look at gender-based violence, it's specifically towards a specific gender. And for us, it's our girls and women that we work with.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So next question I have is, What do you think are some of the root causes of gender-based violence, and how do we as Girl Up advocates address it? And I would love for Sanya to start us off.
Sure, thanks. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Sanya and I work with the UN Women Office here in India. I think, let me go back to also, as we are celebrating 40 years of adopting CEDAW and Beijing Declaration for 25 years now, let me go back to what some of these normative frameworks tell us in terms of the root causes for violence against women, which is, our gender socialization, which is our social conditioning and a lot of gender-based stereotypes that come out of our social environments. It's also a lot of individual behavior, which looks at, for example, substance abuse, which becomes an enabler or a catalyst, to perpetuate more gender-based violence. It's a lot of our perception on masculinity in the patriarchal societies that we live in. It's also a lot of social and cultural norms that we are taught that encourage a lot of harmful practices which are more gendered in nature. So I think these are some of the things where, violence against women and girls is deeply rooted in these kind of gender inequalities that have been manifesting historically, in unequal power relationship between men and women. So these are something that I identify as root causes, but also as young leaders, I think it is a slow and gradual process to undo what we've learned for the longer period of our lives, and what we see also in our peer groups and our environments that we breathe in. It is a gradual process, but I think it is very, very important to break some of those stereotypes and cultural norms, and start questioning. I think that's one of the difference where I think the power in young people is that they know how to question. They have the aptitude of critically analyzing what it is, why is it, what are some of the reasons behind it, and how can we undo that? So I think for us, the first step could be to look at it critically and question, and then find easier ways to address some of those things as we move to next levels of some of the harder challenges that we have to face. Thank you.
That was so insightful. And the next person I would like to touch on that is Majo.
Hi, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with you having this conversation. I'm Majo Aldana. I'm the country manager for Girl Rising. I would say to add to what Sanya was talking about, I would say the root causes of gender-based violence, simply put for me, it's patriarchy. It's a system that wants to oppress everyone that is not white, a man, heterosexual. And so everyone that's different, that doesn't look like a colonizer, basically, in our history of the world, is seen as less human. And in this case, I think young people, I agree with Sanya, have an ability, a special ability to question things. And one of the best things young people can do is breaking the silence, is being able to identify what violence is, what gender-based violence is, and being able to speak about it and name it and identify it. And just by breaking the silence, there's a lot going on already. There's a lot of movement. So I would say that would be the first thing to do, break the silence.
And so Girl Up is currently working on a gender-based violence curriculum as we speak right now. So I wanted to start off with Dr. Kakenya. What do you think will be the most impactful on preventing gender-based violence, or what avenue that we as girls can use, or gender equality advocates?
So I think for me, what has worked in our work, it's one, to be really patient, because when we enter into this work, most of the time we want to see change right away. But as we have talked about today, you know, GBV is deeply entrenched into different cultures, communities. It is deep, and really going into it, you have to be patient and persistent. I think the biggest thing also is to persist, because sometimes we see and programs that start in, it's a 2-year program, it's a 3-year program, and those don't really solve, because then what happens after 3 years? You step out and you go. And I think we need to be persistent. We need to stay there. And then we need to really look in collaboration. To be effective and to really end GBVs, we have to work with the boys, we have to work with the men. And I can tell you from the work that we do, yes, we do the social changing of mindset, because that's why we take the girls at 8 years old when the society is telling her that now you're becoming a woman, you need to start behaving this way. And we unleash her and tell her, you know, you have dreams, you're a girl, you can be whatever you want. So we really start changing the mindset. But without the boys on that, so you have to bring in the boys to talk about gender-based violence, especially when we talk about FGM. And in our program, our girls don't go through FGM, so they have to be married someday, and we assume that we want the boys to accept them the way they are. And you have to realize that at the root of all is the patriarchal system. And so bringing in the elders, so you really have to collaborate. I think that's the biggest thing. And then let's really drive our passion into sustaining the movement. Let's not just come up and go. We have to have the movement that goes on for the long haul. It's not going to end overnight. And that's why we have to go. So I would say persistent, patient, collaboration, and never fear. Change will happen little by little.
I would like Vivi to also answer the same question, to kind of see how girl up advocates, girls, and gender equality advocates can kind of make the most impact on GBV.
It's I think like one of the first things that you need to do, as it basically is also reflections towards what I have been doing as someone who works on gender-based violence. One of the things that I always remind myself all the time is, of course, to keep educating yourself. Like that's basically like the main thing that you need to do. Educate yourself all the time about what is gender-based violence, what are the types of gender-based violence, and like all of those things that basically kind of like, you know, surrounding the issue itself. And sometimes a lot of people only see this issue as like a standalone issue, but when you talk about gender-based violence, whether you like it or not, you're going to talk about feminism. Whether you like it or not, you're going to talk about the other issue that basically intersect with the gender-based violence itself. Like, for example, like me right now working with Hollaback Jakarta, working with Jakarta Feminist, we are currently advocating on the ratifications of the draft bill of eliminations of sexual violence in Indonesia. And at the beginning, we always think like there's only like this one group of community, but apparently like it affects a lot of other issues as well, like labor issue, environment issue, and stuff like that. So these are things that we need to do at first. Like we need to educate ourselves all the time. Like it's never, there will no end in education, educating ourselves. At the process of educating ourselves, there's no end to it. And then I think second of all is that we need to keep listening to experience of other people and respecting this experience. One of the things that I always encounter all the time is that a lot of people sometimes, even though you are also like a fellow woman, and you know, some also a victim or survivor of sexual violence, for example, there's like always like this comparison, like, oh no, it didn't happen to me, so they think like it didn't happen to other people, but that's not the case. The case is like things that not happening to you, it doesn't mean that it will not happen to other people. So I felt like listening to others' experience and respecting that and kind of believing in that is something that is very essential for, you know, like this, for the girl advocates to start with. And third of all, of course, like amplifying those voices, but in a way that we should never kind of, you know, claiming a stage that is not supposed to be ours. So like I felt like amplifying the voices of the people that are unable to kind of like speaking up. I think it's one of the things that kind of like helping advocate to, you know, voicing the issue itself. Like, for example, like with Hollaback Jakarta, we do have a website where people can share their story, their experience of being sexually harassed, because as simple as one of the reasons why we built this website is to amplify those voices that for a very long time, just talking about your experience being groped is your fault. You know, like people will ask you questions, what were you wearing? What were you, you know, why did you went out by yourself at night and stuff like that. So it's always victim blaming, victim blaming, and victim blaming. That's why we created the safe space. And there are other stuff that you can do, like volunteering to this to the movement and for stuff like that. So those are things that basically a queer advocate can do. And there are many other stuff that, for example, like things that we do. We created a survey on sexual harassment in public space, because we see Indonesia do not have data on sexual harassment in public space. So we provide those data. So like those are things that a lot of people can do, not just queer advocates, but any other woman or any other girls who has the opportunity and also has the platform to do that. Those are things that they can do. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for that. And Dr. Kakenya kind of touched on the idea of creating a movement with everybody involved. And, you know, gender-based violence has the largest impact on women and LGBTQIA people who do not fit into a societal defined gender role. So I wanted to ask Mehu, what do you see as the role of men in combating gender-based violence?
Well, for one, recognizing in themselves the possibility of difference, like not buying into the concept that boys will be boys, men are men, and that's how they're gonna be. You know, like how do you define yourself as a man and or as a boy? How do you want to be remembered in your space, in your little bit of history that you're sharing with the rest of humanity? And so I think it's also like a self-determination of a different masculinity, a masculinity that is not determined by others that are different to you, in terms of what Anindya was kind of like speaking about, of that intersectionality, of recognizing that there is a system of power relations and of oppression of the peoples around the world, and understanding like what side are you on? Do you want to be on the side of the oppressor, or do you want to foment the freedom of others and of yourself? And so I think men and boys can play a key role in unlearning the patterns of violence and masculine behavior that they should be, you know, carrying out every day. And I truly believe they can be allies. And understanding also what that is, like going deeper into what allyship means and where is it called for, because, you know, like being with us on a street when it's Women's Day on you know, like there's marches around the world, that's great. You know, it's okay, but it's not enough. Like, how else do you want to be an ally and a companion, not only as a, you know, a possible future partner or parent, but also as just a human being? What side of history do boys and men want to be on?
Thank you so much. And I also want Sanya to kind of touch her perspective on what boys and men can kind of, how can they be allies in the movement to combat gender-based violence?
Thank you. I think it's very interesting because I wouldn't say that men and boys are allies, but they would be equally a part of, you know, making gender equality a culturally irresistible thing. You know, while we talk about women and girls being half of the world, it actually has to talk to both the halves, in order to make gender equality a reality for everyone. So in that sense, they're not just allies, but they're also equal participants. They're equal, audience that we need to invest in. We probably need to also listen to them equally as much as to women and girls, to understand, how do some of the root causes that we've talked about, how do you change that? How do you unlearn all of these things? So I think there has to be an equal investment in them. One has to listen to them equally. One also has to recognize the kind of differences, that each of the gender identity carries, and how do you level them at the same platform. Very, very important, therefore, to engage with men and boys, to harbor those respectful relationships between different gender identities. I think that's the primary role, for us to engage with men and boys. In terms of breaking stereotypes, in terms of creating respectful relationships within a family, within a society, and then multiplying the units. That's how we should be engaging with them. Yeah.
Okay, seems like time is running out, but I just wanted to thank everybody here for coming on to be on this panel and being part of the amazing We Need to Talk Girl Up Summit. I really love all the work you guys are doing, and I'm really excited to see the future and how all of us could finally combat gender-based violence in our community.